"Don't lay a hand on me, you ignorant black girl." The sentence landed harder than any slap could have. It shattered the refined calm of the Four Seasons Beverly Hills like a gunshot ringing out in a cathedral. It ripped through the delicate clinking of silverware, through the soft hum of the jazz quartet, through the hushed conversations of wealthy moguls and power brokers. The room froze. Eyes swiveled. Phones quietly angled to record. Charles Drake, billionaire founder of Drake. Nova Technologies didn't so much as flinch. He simply adjusted his cufflinks, annoyed that his $1,000 jacket now carried a few drops of Bordeaux. Naomi Ellis stood motionless, napkin folded in one hand, a bottle of water in the other. She didn't speak. She didn't apologize. She didn't cry. She didn't have to. Because what Charles Drake didn't know, what he couldn't have imagined, was that Naomi wasn't just another waitress earning a paycheck at an investor's dinner. She was the adopted daughter of Elliot Strauss. Taken in at 7, graduated. At the top of her class, former track star, now working evenings at a luxury hotel not out of necessity, but by intention, to observe, to learn, to reveal. Charles hadn't just demeaned a black woman, it insulted the most consequential person in that room, and he had done so on camera. With the fate of his $3.5 billion acquisition hanging by a thread, this isn't just a tale of arrogance, it's a black story. A story of power, prejudice, and the quiet resilience of someone who had been ignored too many times until tonight. Because from this moment forward, everything would change. This isn't a fabricated drama, it's a warning wrapped in truth. If you've ever been dismissed, belittled, or told you didn't matter, you'll want to stay for every word. If you believe respect should never be negotiable, let this message spread further, because tonight the waitress was a queen. And the man who thought he controlled the table was about to receive the most costly lesson of his life. Naomi Ellis had never known comfort. She was born into endurance. Only 26, she had lived through more than most people twice her age. Her mother died while Naomi was still in high school. Cancer, the merciless kind that doesn't knock politely but barges in, steals everything, and leaves only debt and silence behind. Her father had never been in the picture. The day after the funeral, Naomi became both sister and mother to her 10-year-old brother, Elijah, who had cerebral palsy. Elijah's smile could brighten a city. His needs never stopped. But to Naomi, he was everything. She had once run track. On a full scholarship, Olympic dreams glimmering in her future. But dreams don't pay rent. Bills mounted, therapy costs piled up, so she stepped away from the podium and into the grind. 3 jobs. 6 days a week, overnight shifts stacked on top, all to keep Elijah in school and in therapy. Naomi never complained. She never sought sympathy. She didn't post cryptic messages about hardship. She believed in doing the hard work quietly. The world didn't need to hear her pain, needed to see her persistence. Her beauty was striking. Almond-shaped eyes, smooth skin, a jawline that carried strength even when her words were soft. People underestimated her often. She let them. She allowed them to believe she was invisible, because sometimes invisibility is armor. Her job at the Four Seasons wasn't desperation, it was strategy. She could have taken easier roles, but serving in the elite dining room, where billionaires wined and dined beneath chandeliers, gave her something money couldn't: access. More than that, perspective. Naomi watched. She listened. She studied. She noticed how power moved in silence. She saw that kindness was rare, while cruelty disguised as confidence was often celebrated. Most of all, she realized that those ignored most often knew the most. So when Charles Drake tried to humiliate her in a hall full of self-proclaimed kings, she didn't flinch, because queens don't lash out, they remember. And when the time comes, they rise. Charles Victor Drake never believed in apologies. He believed in control, in silence, in dominance. The silence that fills a room after someone airs long enough to make them feel your disapproval. That was his favorite form of power. By 38, Charles had clawed his way to the top of the tech world. CEO of Drake Nova Technologies, a company born in his college dorm, now a billion-dollar titan in less than a decade. Innovation, sure, but he credited not vision, but control. He hadn't built an empire by being liked. He had built it by being feared. He had a reputation. Brutal in negotiations, merciless in boardrooms. The kind of leader who didn't fire people for failing, but for hesitating. To him, hesitation was weakness, and weakness was unacceptable. Inside Drake Nova, his name was whispered like a storm warning. Some admired him, most feared him, but all obeyed him. Charles believed business was war, and in war, there are no friends, only casualties. His public image was polished, sharp suits, sharper quotes, interviews about disruption and discomfort. But off camera, his philosophy was simple. People are tools, and tools are only valuable if they work. So when he entered the ballroom that night, he didn't see human beings. He saw chess pieces. Elliot Strauss, billionaire investor from San Francisco, was the king to win over. Everyone else were pawns, background noise, including especially the servers. Charles never thanked them, never met their eyes, never considered that the person carrying a tray might one day carry something more dangerous. He was arrogant, but not stupid. He understood power plays, read contracts like poker hands, but what he never valued, never studied, was character. And on this night, that blind spot would ruin him, because the woman he dismissed as background noise, she was the headline. He was about to become the cautionary tale no one would forget. The ballroom glittered like a dreamscape. White linens draped over mahogany tables, candles flickered in crystal holders. The string quartet's melody floated like silk. This wasn't just dinner. It was the dinner, the kind where billion-dollar futures were whispered over appetizers, where alliances were sealed with wine and shattered with smirks. A room where one wrong phrase could shake markets or erase someone from the Forbes list overnight. The guest list sparkled with power. Venture capital legends, media titans, even a U.S. senator or two blending into designer ties. But all eyes centered on one man, Elliot Strauss. Strauss didn't need to be loud. At 72, the German-born investor was a quiet storm in a world of thunder. His firm, Strauss Holdings, had bankrolled some of the most successful and ethical ventures in 2 decades. But his danger wasn't money, it was silence. He spoke rarely, but when he did, the world shifted. And tonight, he was weighing whether to commit $3.5 billion to acquire Drake Nova Technologies. The anticipation wasn't about the food. It was about whether Charles Drake would close the deal. Naomi moved only steps away. Crisp uniform pressed, hair pulled back, posture impeccable. She flowed like background music, present, essential, unnoticed. She knew this rhythm by heart, which glasses to refill, which guests preferred sparkling, who made eye contact, and who avoided it. And she knew tonight felt different. The tension clung to the air like humidity. She had memorized every table assignment, studied Strauss's diet, noted Charles's favorite wine. She was prepared, but not for what came next. Charles Drake sat at the head table, confidence radiating. Elliot Strauss sat across, calm, unreadable. Their entourages flanked them, nodding at every phrase. Naomi approached with a bottle of Chateau Margaux, her steps steady, her hand firm. She leaned in to pour. That's when the glass tipped hand. The room shifted. The wine didn't shatter, it didn't need to. It spilled slowly, deliberately, like fate itself had guided it. Dark red Bordeaux bled across the linen, crawling toward Charles's $1,000 suit. A few drops marked his custom monogram. Naomi reacted instantly. "I'm so sorry, sir," she whispered, already reaching with a napkin. Instinct, training, years of reflex. But Charles Drake didn't see service. He saw offense. He didn't speak as though correcting a mistake. He spoke as though a king, addressing a servant who had dared step on marble. "Don't touch me, you ignorant black girl." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They were surgical, cold, designed to slice through dignity. The table froze. Conversations halted, forks hung midair. The quartet's note lingered awkwardly, unsure whether to continue. Naomi stood still, napkin in hand, eyes lowered. She had heard worse before, snide jokes, whispered insults. But this was different, because this time the entire room had heard. It too, Charles didn't apologize. He didn't glance at her. No. He reached for a fresh napkin, as if brushing away an insect. One junior executive chuckled nervously, pretending the moment wasn't radioactive. Naomi didn't move. That silence was louder than any scream. Across the table, Elliot Strauss set his fork down. He didn't speak, didn't blink, but his gaze landed on Charles with the weight of a gavel. Naomi finally stepped back. "Please enjoy your meal," she said evenly. "No anger only. Something stronger. Resolve." The room attempted to restart. Conversation resumed, but stiffly. Phones buzzed, some recording, some messaging. The damage was irreversible, but not for Naomi. The real crack lay beneath Charles's feet. And before he realized it, he was already falling. Elliot Strauss didn't move. While others shifted awkwardly, he remained still, utterly still. The kind of stillness that says, "I saw everything, I'd forget nothing." At 72, Elliot had encountered men like Charles Drake all his life. Different names, different suits, same arrogance. He had grown up in post-war Berlin, raised by a mother who endured more than most could imagine. She had taught him the power of silence, not as weakness, but as weapon. When someone tells you who they is, RCD say watch, they always reveal themselves when they believe no one important is looking. Tonight, Charles had revealed himself. Unfortunately for him, someone important was watching. Naomi had handled the humiliation with a composure beyond her years, her voice even, her movements precise. But Elliot had seen the subtle tremor in her shoulders, the pause in her breath, the flicker in her eyes. He knew that pause. He had lived that pause. It was the hesitation of someone deciding whether to crumble or to rise. And Naomi had chosen to rise. He admired that. But beyond admiration, he felt something deeper. Confirmation. Naomi had insisted on taking this job herself. He had offered her comfort, security, even a leadership role. She had declined each one. She mentioned that she wished to truly grasp how American business functioned. Not from the luxury of a boardroom, but from the ground level. Now, he finally realized why. Charles Drake had just committed the costliest error of his career. Leaned toward his assistant, whispering in German, "It's time." The assistant gave a nod and slipped away from the table, phone already in hand. Elliot didn't have to raise his tone. He didn't have to rise from his seat. Real power doesn't shout. It observes. And when the right moment arrives, it acts. Charles, still unaware, carried on speaking, laughing a bit too loudly, attempting to sweep the moment beneath the polished rug of high society. But Elliot wasn't concealing anything. He was recording it mentally, morally, and soon, in action. Because when character is measured publicly, consequences must appear publicly as well. And Elliot Strauss had reached his decision. The courses kept arriving, but no one was hungry anymore. Steaks were set on plates hot enough to steam. Fine sauces decorated the meat like art. Glasses were topped off automatically. Wine pouring as though the celebration still lived, but no one at table one was truly celebrating now. Elliot Strauss sat with hands folded, knife untouched, eyes heavy with silence. Charles Drake, on the other hand, kept pushing to regain the room with shallow bravado and louder than usual laughter. He leaned into his sales pitch, speaking quickly, speaking forcefully. "You know what separates victors from complainers?" he asked, his voice cutting across the table like a badly timed toast. "Winners move past distractions. They focus. They conquer." His executives bobbed their heads to eagerly, the kind of gesture that silently begs, "Please, just let this pass." Elliot didn't nod. Instead, he lifted his water glass, took a single sip, and set it down again without breaking eye contact. Naomi returned with quiet precision. Tray balanced, carrying the next course. Roast duck perfectly timed, perfectly arranged. She served. Strauss first, then his assistants, then the other investors, Drake last. That detail didn't slip by unnoticed. Charles caught the order, his jaw tightening. He didn't bother to thank her. Instead, he muttered under his breath, still learning her place. I see Naomi offered no reply. She didn't falter. She placed the last plate with the same care she had shown all evening, then moved on to refill glasses. Elliot watched her. The way she carried herself with composure even as the air thickened with tension. The way she shared a gentle smile with the elderly couple nearby. The way she bent to pick up a fallen crayon and handed it softly back to a child. This wasn't mere service. This was grace under strain. Charles Drake, despite all his influence, couldn't see it. To him, she was simply someone beneath him. Someone to be dismissed, corrected, ignored. Let's shift to numbers.
Strauss,
Charles suddenly said, attempting to redirect. 3.5 billion. Full integration within 2 quarters. We'll double your return in less than 18 months? Elliot tilted his hand slightly. Before we discuss figures, he replied calmly, I prefer to observe values. A chill ran through the table. In that single statement, Elliot had clarified everything. This evening was no longer about contracts. It was about character. And Charles Drake had already failed at the first course. It had been meant as routine. Naomi approached once more, this time carrying a water pitcher. The tension at the table had shifted. It's no longer sharp but thick, weighty. The kind of heaviness that hangs in the air when people pretend nothing occurred, yet every single one of them remembers. She moved with practiced skill, pouring water with precision, no wasted motion, no misplaced emotion. She had served countless tables like this, dozens of men like Charles Drake, but tonight was not just another dinner. She reached the far end. Charles's seat. She tilted the pitcher toward his glass, his hand shot forward. He didn't smile, he didn't speak. He simply seized her wrist firmly. Not hard enough to bruise, but enough to send a message. You wait until I finish speaking, he hissed, voice low, breath heavy with wine. When real business is in progress, you don't interrupt. You stand there like proper help is meant to. His grip lingered. The room didn't gasp this time. No one dropped a fork, but eyes shifted. People noticed. Naomi held his gaze steady, unshaken, not diminished. Yes, sir, she said softly, her tone calm yet unbreakable. I understand perfectly. Then gently, without force, she slid her wrist free and stepped back. Charles blinked as though, startled, she hadn't flinched, as though disappointed his intimidation had failed. But Naomi didn't retreat. She moved to the next guest, her motions just as smooth as before, her dignity whole. Her silence louder than words. Elliot Strauss once again placed down his silverware. Slowly, purposefully, he leaned toward his assistant and spoke 2 words in German. It's time. The assistant nodded, rose, and slipped through the side door. Charles carried on speaking, still trying to sell himself as if nothing had shifted. But something had damned everyone at the table knew it. Because this was no longer about spilled wine. It wasn't even about an insult. It was about repetition. It's a kind of offense that declares this isn't an accident. This is who I am. That truth was no longer whispered. It had been witnessed. Consequence was no longer a matter of if, but only when. Charles was still talking when Elliot Strauss rose from his chair. He didn't begin with a speech, not immediately. He stood slowly, quietly, like a storm gathering mass before thunder breaks. His rising alone was enough to still the table. The room followed his cue. Conversations faded. Silverware froze midair. Even the staff along the wall stood motionless, sensing something irreversible was about to occur. Elliot's eyes met Naomi's. She looked back, steady, calm, unreadable, with a nod that was both permission and acknowledgement. He turned to the table again. Mr. Drake, Elliot said, voice level, almost gentle. Before we continue, there is someone very important I'd like you to meet properly. Charles frowned, forcing a smile, of course. One of your vice presidents, your general counsel. Elliot didn't answer him directly. Instead, he lifted a hand toward the back of the room. From the far wall, Naomi stepped forward, no tray, no apron only. The quiet confidence of someone with nothing to conceal and everything to reveal. She stopped beside Elliot, not behind him, but beside him. This, Elliot said, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder, is Naomi Ellis, my daughter. The air cracked like glass under stress. She was adopted at 7. She chose to keep her birth name. But understand clearly, she is my daughter, and I am fully her father. Charles blinked once, then again, lips parting, no words forming. Naomi has been working here, Elliot continued. Not for money, but to learn firsthand how those in power treat the people they think are beneath them. He turned slightly toward the rest of the guests. And tonight, you all saw it clearly. He didn't need to raise his tone. He didn't have to. A ripple of murmurs spread across the room. Phones tilted higher, eyes widened. The silence thickened with realization. Naomi stood tall, chin lifted. Not triumphant, just truthful, just visible. Elliot looked back at Charles one last time. The young woman you called stupid is the one I raised to be wiser than most CEOs I've met, and in that instant, the deal was not merely at risk. It was already dead.